databases and I've got users out there in Teradata. We'll talk about this, but they're actually kind of equivalent. It's a little strange to get used to, but I want you to see this. This is so important. You got the opportunity of a lifetime here. This is going to clear some stuff up for sure. Marketing, they've got 10 gigabytes of spool space. Sales, they've got 5 gigabytes of spool space. And DBC has got a ton of spool space. I've got a great question for you here. There are 3 people in marketing and they've been given 10 gigabytes of spool also. Could all 3 people in marketing run a query at the same time, each reaching 9 gigabytes of spool space? A common misconception about spool space is that it's a limit, like a pool limit. Everybody's got to share that spool space. Absolutely not. If I had 100 people in marketing, marketing only had 10 gigabytes of spool as a database, and all 100 of my users ran 9 gigabyte queries, it's no problem because it's a speed limit. Think about that. Have you ever driven down the highway and you saw 70 miles an hour? You never looked next to you and said, well, there's another person on the highway. We should both go 35. Doesn't work that way. If it says 70 miles per hour, you go 70. If your credit card limit says you got a $5,000 limit, you can spend $5,000. Who cares what anybody else is doing? And that's the way it's going to work in Teradata. A database might get a 10 gigabyte spool limit. What that really means is everybody under that database could go 10 gigabytes themselves without any hesitation. You see, that's the beauty of spool space, is that it is a speed limit. It's empty space for intermediate results, and as long as you don't go over your assigned spool limit, there's no issue here. There are 2 reasons, good reasons, that there is spool space on each user. You see, sometimes a user makes a mistake. The query could run for like 6 years, but thank goodness when they reach their spool limit, it is aborted and they go, woo, that was close. I could have gotten in a lot of trouble here. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2, it really keeps people from hogging the system. When they have their spool limit, they can only do so much like they're expected to do. Salespeople might be expected to do less than marketing or vice versa, and they're given different spool limits because if they go over it, there's probably a mistake involved. So it prevents mistakes and it keeps people from hogging on the system. Now, if you think you're going to go out there and log on several times from several different machines with your user ID and trick Teradata, it's not going to work that way. They track the user's total space, and the minute you go over, queries are aborted. Every Teradata user at one time said, what? My query ran out of spool, aborted. If you go over your spool limit by 1 byte of data, the query is aborted. You don't even get half the report. You get nothing but out of spool error. Now listen here. There's a couple of reasons that might happen. Number 1, you had 10 megabytes of spool, you went over your 10 megabytes. You go over your limit, you're done. There's a couple of other reasons that you wouldn't see right away that I want you to understand. You see, spool is based on a per amp basis. So if you have 10 megabytes of spool and there are 10 amps, you got 1 megabyte on each amp. So if the data is not spread evenly, you can go over that spool limit on 1 amp, and that's why you're really aborted. Here's an example where I've actually given 10 gigabytes of spool. They think I'm going to do some great querying, but there are 10 amps in the system. I get 1 gigabyte per amp. If I go over my 1 gigabyte there, it's over. I'm out of spool. Think about that. Each one of these amps, in a sense, are their own little computer. They don't really care or know what's going on anywhere else. So when someone's given 10 gigabytes of spool, they don't keep checking amongst themselves and trying to add that up. They say, listen, if the data's spread reasonably, you got 10 gigabytes and there's 10 amps, we should be able to track that by 1 gigabyte per amp. Hey, amps, any of you go over 1 gigabyte on Tera-Tom's queries, you let me know and I will have him aborted. And that's the way it works.